Hey, how's it going everyone? Welcome back to Coxie Tutorials. Today we're going to be starting a brand new tutorial series in Unity 5, and we're going to be doing a first person shooter with all the coding in C#. If you have been following the last tutorial series that I have on my channel, you'll know that it was also a first person shooter and we wrote all the scripts in JavaScript. So this is going to be a really good tutorial series for people that want to learn a little bit of C#. And if you have already had experience with C#, hopefully I can teach you some really cool things about Unity and about coding to help you make a pretty decent first-person shooter of your own. If you're brand new to Unity, just go ahead and download it from their website. Make sure that when you download it, after you've downloaded the actual installer, that you select the standard assets package. You choose that basically where you get to pick if you want iOS, Android, all that kind of stuff, WebGL. There'll also be an option to include the standard assets. So make sure that you tick that box because we are going to be using some of the actual standard assets. Okay, so once you've done that, just go ahead and start a new project. I'm using one of the better versions of Unity. You can just go ahead and use the newest version that they have out at the moment. You don't need to use the beta. And once you've created your project, we'll have an empty scene just with the main camera and the directional light, and it'll be the parent of these two objects will be the actual scene, which is untitled at the moment because we haven't saved. So first thing we're going to do is actually go to File, and we're going to save this scene, and I'm going to call mine main level. I suggest that you guys just call everything exactly what I call it. It's just going to make your life a lot easier. Sometimes it's really important to call things the same name as what I do. Sometimes it's not, but it can get very confusing if you try to name things differently. So yeah, I suggest that you just call everything the same as what I do. Okay, so what we're going to do, we've got our new project. I'm not going to build a terrain this time for this tutorial series. We did that in the last one. We're going to go to the Asset Store instead. If you don't have the Assets tab up here, you can just go to Window and just click on the Asset Store there, but I'm pretty sure you're going to have the Asset tab up there. With the terrain stuff, I actually have quite a fair bit of cool stuff to show you about the terrain that I've learnt. But I think I'll do a separate tutorial on terrain where we'll probably make some terrain in Unity, or even make some terrain in a program outside of Unity and then import it into Unity and manipulate it in the Unity editor itself. That was one idea I had. Another idea I also had was I was thinking I might do a separate tutorial series and just do a basic survival game, and in that series we can make an island with water and things like that as our terrain, so, or as the actual game level. But you guys just let me know in the comments which you would prefer, and we'll see what we can do. So anyway, once you go to the Asset Store, you got your 3D models here. Just click on 3D models, click on environments, and just choose the free only. Every single asset that I use in this tutorial series, I'm going to show you guys how to get it, and it's all going to be free so that everyone can follow along and use the same stuff. So I'm going to get this 3D modular kit here, and this is going to be a really excellent base for our level to start off with because it's fully modular. So go ahead and import this, and Barking Dog is the guy or girl that, or team that has actually put this on the Asset Store, so thank you to them. Just go ahead and import the whole lot. I thought rather than building a level from scratch like it's been done a million times on YouTube already, some good and some bad, but I didn't want to bore you guys too much, so we'll use this as our base. And as I said, we can set everything up quite quickly now, and then we can always add to this later on because it is modular. So once we have imported that into Unity, we should have a main level which we've saved, and we should have the barking dog folder. So go ahead and open that up. Open up that 3D folder, and then open up, not the prefab, sorry. Open up that folder and you'll see he or she actually has a test map scene. So just open this scene up now, and you will see that we have a level already set up, just a very basic start level where we can start the game. And as I said, we can add to this later on, and we can probably do some cool things to this as well, just to teach you or get you started on some basic C# scripting. We have fans and we have lights in this environment, so we're going to write a script to animate these fans, and we're also probably going to make a script that we can make the lights flicker with, and things like that as well, just to start off. Okay, so once you've got this scene opened up, click back here on your assets, and you should have these two here. Just grab the level out of the hierarchy and just drag the whole lot down to make a prefab, and you'll see the little blue cube come up here. So now we can actually just drag this into any scene, and we can just have this level set up straight away. Okay, so once you've done that, double click back on the main level, just click don't save, we don't need to save that. And this is our original level that we started with, our main level. So just grab the prefab, drop it into our scene, and then come up here to the actual transform. Make sure that you've actually got the transform of the parent level that holds all the children or the level parts underneath it, and come to this little cog over here and then just reset the transform. So now everything should be 0, 0, 0 for position and rotation, and the scale should be 1. Okay, so now we've done this, we've actually got this basic little level set up. We need to work out where we want to start off our character. So I'll just give you a really quick rundown of how to navigate around. I'm not going to go into too much detail because it's been done a million times before, but maybe some of you won't know things I'm about to tell you. So hold down the right mouse button and you'll see the little eye icon, and if you're holding this down you can actually look around, but while you're holding down the right mouse button you can use W, S, A and D to move around. So whatever I'm looking at with the eye, if I push W I will zoom in to that, and if I press D I'll scroll to the right, and A and I'll scroll to the left, and if I press S I will go back. You can also, while holding the right mouse button, you can press E to go straight up and Q to go straight down. So this should be pretty handy, so you can navigate around the level quite quickly and get everything set up. You can also, of course, use the mouse scroll wheel to scroll back and scroll forward, and you can also push the mouse scroll wheel in so you get the little hand icon, and you can move it to pan around the level like so. Okay, so that's pretty much all we're going to need to navigate around our level. So when you installed Unity, when you downloaded Unity, you would have had the options to choose if you wanted to have iOS or Android, WebGL, all that kind of stuff. There was also an option for standard assets. So you need to make sure when you download Unity that you choose the standard assets, because we're going to be using some standard assets because they are really, really fantastic, and they've been updated a lot since we started the original tutorial series over a year ago. So anyway, if you've got your standard assets, you can just come down here to your assets folder and right click, and then if you go to import package, you can have a list of all the things that you can get from the standard assets. So we're going to get characters. And depending on your skill level, you can uncheck the things that we don't need. We're just going to be using the first person character, but I suggest just grabbing the whole lot and not touching it, just in case you accidentally deselect something that we're going to need. So wait for that to import into Unity and compile all the scripts and things like that. Shouldn't take too long. And this stuff obviously depends on the speed of your computer. Mine's about a middle of the range computer, so it's not too bad. Yours might be faster or slower depending on what system you're running, but it's not going to be too bad. So now we have the standard assets folder in our assets. So if we open up the standard assets, open up the characters, first person, prefabs, you got two choices, the rigid body or the FPS controller. I'm going to use the FPS controller because I prefer that. And you can see straight away that once you've put it in your scene, you can manipulate it using the X, Y, and Z axis, and it's currently set to movement, which is this little tool up here. And we also have the rotation, the size and the scale tool, and then we have the rec tool, which is only used, we'll only use it for UI and 2D sprites. It's pretty pointless trying to use it for anything else. With these as well, they do have shortcuts, which I didn't tell you guys last time. So for the movement tool, it starts off at W, and then E for rotation, R for scale, and that's about the only three we're going to be using. So press W and you can actually move your character around and make sure he's not under the ground and things like that. So once you've got that set up, you can click to the game view, and you can actually see what the camera's looking at right now. You can also see what it's looking at by opening up the first person controller, and a child of the first person controller is this first person character, and this is just the camera basically for our player, and you'll get this little camera preview and it will give you the same thing as what we're looking at through the game view. So go back to scene. So you'll see the character is actually looking at this wall over here, and I want him to be looking at this doorway here when we start. So to do this, the easiest way is just to grab your game, bring it down here and dock it next to your animation. If you don't have an animation, don't worry about it, just dock it next to your console, and you can size these windows to how you want. So now this is our game view and this is the scene. I've just done this to demonstrate an easy way to work in Unity when you're doing things like this, because you can actually see exactly what's going on down here in the game. So if you click on the first person controller and press E for the rotation tool, and then we want to rotate it around on the y-axis. This is the one going straight up, and we want to rotate it around the y-axis. So the green line here, if we just left click on that and drag it around, you'll see on the bottom that we're actually looking at the door. You can obviously do this without using the game view to have a look, but I just wanted to show you that it's really handy for setting up weapons on your player and all kinds of stuff. So I'm just going to move the game tab back up next to my scene, and I'm also going to bring this back down so that we have a much larger viewport. You can't do anything because it's on the game view, so make sure you click back on scene, and now we are back in the actual scene view. I don't think we're going to need the directional light because we've actually got lights in here, so I'm just going to disable this for 1 second and then play the game and see what the lighting is like. And as you can see, yeah, we don't need the directional light at all. So now you actually have a mouse and cursor lock built in with the first person controller. We didn't have that in the previous tutorial series, and you can actually see this if you click on the first person controller, and then he has this first person controller script. If you go down to the mouse look, you'll see the lock cursor option here, so you can choose to enable or disable it or use your own, but we're going to use this one because it's fine. So now we've got our actual level and player set up. We can just click on this directional light and just delete it because we don't need it. I'm just going to close this back up, and what we might do, oh, hang on a minute. You can see because I started the game, we have this little warning here that we have 2 audio listeners. This happens because we have 2 cameras in the scene. We have our main camera, which has an audio listener attached to it, and then the camera on our first person character also has an audio listener. So just go ahead and delete the main camera as well. So all we should have now is the first person controller and the actual level itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just head over here a little bit. I'm going to head up to this first fan here, and we're going to write a very simple script for our first C# script, just to give you guys an idea of how it works if you haven't done it before, and if you have, well, you know, this might be interesting for you as well. So if you click on this actual fan up here, it'll highlight the whole level. If you click on the fan blade again, it should just select that actual game object itself, and you'll see it says fan wings up here. And this previously must have had a script attached to it, and it also had an audio source with an audio clip attached to it. So we'll keep the audio source, but this script here, you can just click on this little cog and remove the component because we don't need it. And in your hierarchy here, if you scroll down, you'll see that this was the actual main object, the whole fan. And then when you open it up, you have the fan one, and then the actual fan wings or the fan blades, and this is what we actually want to rotate. So on your fan blades, come over to the add component, come over to new script, and you'll see by default the scripting language is C#, so just leave it on C#, and I'll just call this fan. So now once we've added that, it'll actually add it to the fan wings game object, as you see there. And if you go back to your main assets here, it'll also be in the assets as well. So we have the script in our assets folder. So you can double click on it there to open it up, or you can double click on it here to open it up. I just want to quickly show you one thing before we open up the script. If you come up here to edit, and you come down to preferences, and on external tools, you'll see that I'm actually going to be using Visual Studio 2015. By default, yours will be set to mono develop, so it doesn't matter. You can follow along with mono develop just fine. I'm just going to use Visual Studio because I have it and I'm quite used to using it now, but as I said, it doesn't really matter which one you use. You can still do exactly the same thing. So double click on it here, or you can double click on it here to open it up. And here is our first C# script. You can see it looks a bit different than when you open up a JavaScript, the template for it. You have a few things up the top here that are just automatically added. We don't really need all of these things for this script, but I'm just going to leave them there because there's no point taking them off, in my opinion. And you'll see that we have the public class fan, and we're using mono behavior. We're not going to worry about getting in detail about all this stuff right now because it'll just be confusing, but basically just leave that how it is. I'm just going to move these brackets down because I prefer that, and I'm also going to get rid of the start because we don't need that, and I don't need that commenting either. And I'm also just going to fix up that as well. Okay, so we can get started now. And you'll notice that it's very similar to JavaScript in the way that we had the start and update function. And in JavaScript, instead of void, it says function. Void just means that it's not going to return anything. And don't worry if you don't understand this stuff now. It doesn't matter. It's going to work exactly the same as if we were doing a JavaScript previously, like we did in the other tutorial series. Anyway, so we're going to do our first variable, and instead of writing var, we don't write var in C#. You can either choose to have a public or private. If we typed in here public float, you actually have to name the type of variable that you want it to be, and the public float is going to be speed, and this is going to be the speed of our fan, and I'm just going to equal it to say 200 because I want it to spin pretty fast. And you'll notice that once you've typed that, you can either come up here and save it, and that'll just save this one script. If you have a lot of scripts open up here, you can choose to save all, and they actually have hotkeys as well. Control S to save the one you're working on, and Control Shift S to save all the scripts you've been working on. I'm in the habit now of just Shift Control S all the time now to make sure that every single script has been saved. And if you go back into Unity, you'll now notice that we'll get a little variable here, our speed, and it's got the 200, so that we can change the speed of the fan in the inspector, just like we used to do in JavaScript with the other tutorial. But instead of having a public variable, it's not always good to have lots and lots of public variables. So instead, we could either type private here, or you can just leave it like that. I just leave it like that. I don't bother writing private. But the problem is, if we save this again and go back into Unity, you'll notice that this will disappear, so we can't change it in the inspector anymore because it's private. But if you go back into your script, you can actually do a square bracket and type in serialize field, and what this will do is it'll actually make it appear in the inspector again, so we can still change it, but the variable is actually private and it can't be accessed from any other scripts. So that's a really nifty little trick as well to use. So now we have our speed there, which we can change, and now what we need to do is go into our update function, and what we want to do is we want to make this fan spin. But generally you would think that we'd need to make this spin on the y-axis, but sometimes axis can change depending on how the object's being manipulated in Unity. Like if you had a wall that was, you know, the y-axis was facing straight up, and then you turn the wall on its side, the y-axis would now be facing would now be the horizontal line, and the z-axis would be the vertical line. So an easy way to test what rotation axis we need to rotate on is just come up here, use our rotation tool, and if I turn this, you'll see that it's actually moving on the z-axis up here. So we know we need to rotate this on the z, even though you would think that it should be rotating on the y. So it helps to double check. Just reset this back to 0. So we know that we need to rotate it on the z-axis. So to do that is quite easy. All we need to do, we type in transform, and the transform with a little t means that we're actually going to access the transform of this game object. So we're actually going to access this transform on this game object, and it knows this because this is the script is attached to this game object. So we're going to access the transform, and then we're going to do a dot. And the beauty of using C# compared to the JavaScript, as I said, is it gives you all the options and things come up, and it can explain to you exactly what each thing is, and it makes learning scripting, in my opinion, a hell of a lot easier, so that you can see what's going on. So we're going to go transform, and if I just type in R, you'll see that rotate comes up, and it gives you an explanation, and it's a vector 3, and a vector 3, all vector 3 is just the X, Y, and Z axis, and we're using rotate, so it's rotating on the X, Y, and Z axis. So if we go ahead and double click that, we'll have rotate, and then we need to let it know exactly what axis we want to rotate on, and it always goes X, Y, Z. So we don't want to rotate on the X, and then we do a comma, and we don't want to rotate on the Y, then we do another comma after the 0, and now we're up to our Z angle, and we're going to use this speed float for the actual Z axis. So if we type in speed, and then what we want to do is we want to times this by the actual time in the game, so it's the speed of that goes along with the actual time in the game. So we can just write speed and then shift 8 to get the time symbol, and then we can go time dot delta time, and it'll give you an explanation of what delta time is. There's a few different time functions in Unity, and delta time is the time in seconds it took to complete the last frame. So we're going to use that, and then we're going to put a semicolon on the end, and then we're going to save the script. And now when we go back into Unity, if you go into your game view here and you haven't got maximize on play selected like that, if you have maximize on play selected when you start the game, you'll just have the whole screen will be the actual game. Whereas if we start the game with it off, we can still use Unity. We can use the editor. So if we push escape, it'll automatically unlock our little mouse cursor, and if we go up to scene and click on the scene, it'll take us back to what we were looking at before. So now you can see the actual fan is spinning around in our game nicely. We can also come up here and open this little drop down, and we can choose maximize, and now we have the whole screen view of the actual game as well. So that's a little handy tip if you want to check something that you were just working on, and just make sure when you come back out of the game that you click back on the actual scene. Okay, so that is our first C# script that we're going to write for the game, and I think I'll just leave it there so that we don't have a massive long first tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and there's going to be a lot of cool stuff coming up. So yeah, I really hope you guys enjoy it and you learn something, and I really appreciate the people that have been supporting me and this channel, and yeah, thanks a lot. See you in the next one. Cheers.